And that, folks, is a wrap for Alabama in the NCAA tournament, falling to UCLA. Final score 88-78 in the Sweet 16. John Talty joining me now. Obviously, if you're an Alabama fan watching this right now, not an easy place to be. Certainly not a place, well, John Talty is going to join me momentarily. Stand by. Certainly not a great place to be. Certainly not where this Alabama team wanted to see their hopes and dreams, end in the tournament, the Sweet 16, but a tremendous run. I just want to get your thoughts first and foremost, just kind of your initial reaction. I've, been tracking you on Twitter and just sort of the emotion of this loss. For me, obviously just watching the tears come streaming out of their face at any player, any team, it's always tough. But really in this one, it just seemed like that everything going in their favor. Obviously first half, the Alex Reese 3 to put it into overtime. And then unfortunately, they just came up short and just couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think we saw at the end of the game, the joys and also the sadness of March Madness. I think it's in part what makes it so great. But, when you're on the losing end of it, it's tough. And I think especially when, there's these kids who, it hits them that this is it. This is the end of their college careers. And you could tell, with Alex Reese and some of those other guys, getting visibly emotional at the end of this game. It's that realization like this was it. I'm not playing college basketball for Alabama anymore. And that's always a really tough thing for anybody to go through. It was an interesting game the whole way through. I think ultimately we knew coming in this was going to be really, again, a contrast of styles. And I think you saw UCLA really enforce their style, their pace much more in Alabama. Never really felt like Alabama got that comfortable. Go into halftime with a big deficit. They come out in second half, they start looking good, but UCLA just never folded. And I think the thing that we're going to be talking a lot about, obviously, is just Alabama's foul shooting struggles. Ultimately, that's probably the difference in this game. And I think it's telling coming out of their last game when they beat Maryland. They go 16 of 33 from 3-point range against Maryland, and they go 11 of 25 from the foul line here against UCLA. And so it just wasn't a hot shooting night for Alabama. And I think we always knew that was potentially one of the issues of this team. If they got cold, it can be a struggle to score.
Yeah, and I think kind of going into the half, the way I looked at it, especially, being down 40-29 at the half. And, I think you could just tell that there was a little bit of struggle. They seemed a little out of rhythm, a little flustered at times. And obviously, Nate Oats, get him in the locker room, give him that pep talk, settle down, quit pressing. And then they go on that 11-0 run in the second half. And you're like, all right, here's that Alabama team. But then you saw, as you mentioned, more trouble from the free throw line, more trouble in the shooting. They weren't the threes weren't falling for them like we had seen in previous games. And I don't even know how you compare this game because that first game against Iona, obviously the lesser opponent, you really got you never got a sense that they were going to really lose that game against Iona. So and then of course against Maryland, sorry Talty, hate to bring it up. I know that's a tough one. The Maryland grad here, but with that being said, I know they had the hot hands. They were firing on all cylinders. And then it's almost like they get to this and it's, you could just tell there was a lot of frustration and just a lot of missed opportunities in this UCLA team. I don't know if UCLA really, I don't want to say they were obviously the better team tonight, but I just, looking at their talent, looking at what they are capable of, Alabama had opportunity to win this game, but things just did not fall in their favor. And it was definitely a little gut wrenching to watch, if you ask me.
Yeah, and I think the key thing too, when we look at the foul shooting issue, is we can look at the aggregate and see it's just a really bad number. But also, you just think back to the game, how many of those, missing the front end of a 1-and-1, or missing one where it felt like one or two of those was going to give them the momentum, was going to kind of put UCLA on the pressure side, and they just they'd make one out of two, or they'd miss both, and I think it allowed UCLA to just kind of keep hanging around. And there was a while where UCLA looked ugly on offense. They started out very poorly in the second half, and then just throughout the second half, it felt like UCLA was really having to work for every basket that they got. Nothing was coming easily to them. Right. And I think that, if they had been able to hit more of those foul shots, hit some more of those 3-pointers, I think that it would have been very difficult for UCLA to keep up. but, Alabama was just never really able to do that. And, it's just part of the challenge. And I think in overtime, I think a lot of times we think, all right, the team that hits that big shot at the end, they're going to have all the momentum in overtime. But I think more often than not, it doesn't work that way. I think we saw it a couple times earlier in this NCAA tournament where, it's actually, the team might have been kind of, playing on tilt a little bit, but when they get a chance to kind of center themselves, talk about it, and I think clearly Mick Cronin, the UCLA coach, had a great plan coming out of overtime. And of course, they hit shots, and that's what it came down to. They hit some pretty ridiculous shots in overtime, and Alabama didn't hit theirs, and so it's a very tough way for them to go out. I'm sure Herb Jones is feeling rough right now. One of the best players in the country, and just did not have his best game here tonight. But it's the NCAA tournament. I mean, all it takes is one team having one great game to knock you out. And UCLA, I wouldn't say it was maybe a great game, but they played a very smart game against Alabama and did the things they needed to do to really put Alabama on the defensive. And ultimately, obviously, it worked out.
Yeah, I think that's that hits the nail on the head. I think they played very smart and certainly, came out with a great game plan, maybe better than many people expected. And of course, for Alabama fans, tough one. If you're an Alabama fan, that last, 2 minutes of overtime, last minute and a half was just brutal to watch, and always an emotional time. So obviously Alabama losing this one 88-78 in overtime to UCLA. So their run to the Sweet 16 or their run in the NCAA tournament comes to an end in the Sweet 16. With that being said, though, year 2 for Nate Oats, so much talent, so much versatility on this basketball team. And yes, they do, lose seniors, but when you look at what the body of work, what he's been able to put together and the future ahead, the contract extension, all that, what can Alabama fans and, this basketball team look forward to 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, I think this is, a tremendous year for Nate Oats in year 2. I mean, winning the SEC, both regular season and the conference tournament, making it to the Sweet 16. I mean, I think fans obviously wanted more. I think the way the path shook out looked like a pretty easy path to the Elite Eight. And so I'm sure their fans are very disappointed. But if you had started at the beginning of the year and said you're going to win the SEC and make it to the Sweet 16, I bet a lot of fans would have taken that. And especially just given the fact that, this group of guys hadn't had that level of success to this point. So I think, when you take a step back, and I think once people get through the pain of tonight and think about it, they'll realize this was a very successful year. I think there's a lot to be very excited about going forward. I think they mentioned one of the broadcasters on an earlier NCAA tournament game where Nate Oats was basically saying, it's not that hard to recruit to this system. People want to play this style of basketball. And I think that's something that would make, if I was an Alabama fan, make me very optimistic about the future, because it's a very fun style of play. They're going to score a lot of points. He's going to let you, bomb threes. And if you're a shooter, it's a lot of fun to play in that style. And so they're going to lose a lot. I wouldn't be shocked if they took a step back next year. Just lose the amount of guys, seniors, the way that carried them, this year. I think, it's going to be very difficult to replace them. But the one thing that I think you should definitely pay a close attention to over the next couple of weeks is that this year, with everybody basically getting a free transfer, there's going to be a lot of guys on the market. There's going to be a lot of guys looking to transfer. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, if Oats and Alabama add, an impact transfer or two that maybe makes them a little bit better next year than people expect. But big picture wise, the program is clearly on an upward trajectory. I think Oats has shown a lot in just year 2. I think he's got a very smart style of play that's exciting. That as a fan, I would love to watch. And I think fans, once they get through the pain of tonight, are going to realize that the program's in really good shape.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part of all this is as you mentioned, you win an SEC title. You win, the regular season, you win an SEC title, you do all these great things. But unlike football, only one team actually goes out like with a win, finishes this thing out and, doesn't, fall obviously to the eventual national champion, because there's no bowl games, right? And at least teams have an opportunity, if they're not playing for a national championship, to still go out with a win. So it's going to hurt, like you said, for a while. It's going to sting, but when you look back at what they've been able to accomplish and been able to do, in just year 2 under Nate Oats, and just the style of play, the tempo. And, I just think it bodes well for this team, recruiting, prospecting, everything out there. And then not to mention, a year ago, we would never have been sitting here having this conversation because, oh, by the way, we didn't even have a tournament. So
Sure.
To get to where we're at now, to be having these conversations, to be watching March Madness, you couldn't have asked for a better game and a better showing, from this Alabama team. And I agree with you. If you would have said Sweet 16, that's where Alabama's going to end up. I think, most Alabama fans would have been like, yeehaw, let's get it. Let's go. So yeah, good stuff. I appreciate it, Talty, as always. And we'll hear from Nate Oats and obviously the players as they wrap up with their final post-game press conference from the NCAA tournament. Thank you all for watching tonight. And thank you to our sponsors, Inline Lighting. We appreciate you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, y'all.